And he's on 99, plays the pull shot, gets it to 100 with a great shot. What a knock. Pakistan in the massive run chase, and he gets 100 for them. Opener, they desperately wanted an opener.
Welcome to the Sports Clinic podcast. With me today is Kani and Dulabhai, who are two cricket analysts from the Twitter space. And we joined you today after a fantastic run chase, the highest in World Cup history, Pakistan's highest since that epic semifinal in 1992. So I want to go in chronological order. Let's start with the Sri Lanka batting. And to me, yes, they scored 345, but to me, the key part was they only scored 61 off the last 10 overs, despite having 6 wickets in hand. Talk to me about that passage of play and what sort of turned the tide.
I'll go first. I think the really important thing was not even just the last 10 overs, but I think Sri Lanka were around 229 after 30. So they ended up getting 115 of their last 20 basically, and that was with I think Samara Vikrama was set at the time, and they had quite a bit of batting left. But Sri Lanka do have a problem with their finishing, so that was always a possibility that you could restrict them a little bit at the death. And even though Samara Vikrama got his 100 and he batted through, I think it was really key that they didn't allow Dhananjaya or Shanaka to get away, and Haris Rauf really bowled well. I thought that Haris Rauf bowled well throughout. Actually, in his first initial 1 or 2 spells, he got a few boundaries, unfortunate boundaries hit off him, but overall I think he did a really solid job. I think there was just that one over where he bowled 2 bouncers, but that were hit for 6. But besides that, he was pretty good today. So while the bowling was quite disappointing for the first 30 overs, that was probably the key to winning the game. The way they came back after that in the last 20.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think there was an obvious lack of discipline, especially with the new ball. I think the rear guard effort within the last 7 overs, you could say they did a fair job. If you were to look at where Sri Lanka was around the 35th over, they were looking set for somewhere between 375, 380, around that margin. So I think that last burst, Shaheen was a little underwhelming today, but I think his last couple of overs, he bowled well overall. Just, I guess, was pitching it up. His pace just wasn't there nearly near what we expect. And I think he was bowling with a little bit of a swollen finger today. But just one thing I want to say about our death overs, I think we sort of did well to take the pace off. There were a lot of more change-up deliveries, which we didn't see as much during the middle overs. So I think they realized, especially with new batsmen coming in, pace off was a little bit harder to kind of get away. And I think that little burst, that keeping them under that 350 gave us a little bit of a psychological edge going into the chase. 350 on any surface is never going to be easy to chase. They knew they would have to chase well. But I think that sort of momentum shift in the last 7 overs, if you will, of the Sri Lankan innings sort of carried over, definitely.
Clearly, the way the innings ended gave the batters hope that, it's a big mental threshold to get over 350, 360. You brought up the slow balls, and I'll ask Abdullah had this question. Is that where some of the experience of Hassan Ali showed up? Because he went for runs, yes, in more than 7 overs, but he managed to take 4 wickets, and was his death over and the latter over bowling, was that his experience showing? Is that one of the tools and skills that he brings to this lineup?
I think his experience is actually showing in all facets of his bowling now, because he doesn't have the skills perhaps, or particularly the speed that he had when he was young. Like, it's that classic athlete trajectory where like with a footballer, when he's not that fast but he uses his guile to to still be a successful player. So in the same way, Hassan has like previously when he used to bowl with the new ball when he was younger, then he would spray it around a little bit. He lacked consistency, but now he's able to hit the right length almost very regularly, much more than he used to when he was younger. And in the same way, he seems to understand the conditions really well. So here he was the one bowling a lot of those slightly back of a length slower balls that the Sri Lankans just couldn't get a hold of at all. And yeah, I think that was really key. His maturity as a player probably, despite Naseem's loss, I think he brings a lot to the team, because at the end of the day, this is still quite a young and inexperienced team. So it was really great to see him execute those skills and do them so well. And of course, like everyone loves the character that he is and the personality that he is. So it's always amazing to see him do well.
Let's come to the batting, and let's start with a big call by the team management, dropping Fakhr in the second game of the World Cup for Abdul Shafiq. It paid off. But the question then arises, what do you do now with Imam? Is that, do you now replace him back to Fakhr? And if you do, is there a chance that Fakhr's confidence is dented, or is he a strong enough personality that he can take that position, or do you just keep the righty-lefty combination with Imam and Abdullah, even though obviously Fakhr will also be righty-lefty? Where do you guys see this? Kani, I'll go to you first.
I think a little bit of it, I'd like to believe, had to do with the matchup as far as Theekshana is concerned. I think this think tank is now taking those sort of equations into consideration. And Fakhr was already sort of a little down with confidence, a little out of form. I would have thought they would have extended the rope initially, but I think given the matchup with Theekshana and already having Imam in the 11, they felt it was better to bring in Abdullah. I would have thought before this game, the thought process would have been to bring Fakhr back for the India game regardless, because Ahmedabad is a very different wicket. It's a little bit more of a tour wicket where it doesn't grip as much as we were seeing in Hyderabad. And again, much like Hyderabad, the conditions for batting get a hell of a lot better in the second innings, as we saw today as well. It is a bit of a tricky situation. If you were to ask me right now, I expect them to go unchanged in Ahmedabad now for the fixture on Saturday. But it's, Fakhr has that tag of a big game player. I think he's been around the scene long enough where he's able to process. He's been dealt with failure. He's been able to come back and respond adequately. Like, let's not forget, he has 300s within this calendar year as well. I truly think he can respond if it comes to it, but my instinct says they'll likely go unchanged for Ahmedabad.
Yeah, so that was my quick follow-up before I come to you, Abdullah. Was if you think this was a tactical matchup-based thing, you're sort of now stuck because the guy you replaced him with just scored a fantastic century. So you're thinking that they keep the Imam Abdullah combination to the Saturday game against India?
Yeah, I am a firm believer in horses for courses. And I think from a tactical standpoint, it made a hell of a lot of sense to take Fakhr out of the firing line. You can say a lot for extending the rope for somebody who's a senior player, who's somebody you're going to rely on in the quote-unquote bigger games, in the knockout games, and sort of giving him an opportunity. I think a lot of him playing against the Netherlands and the first two warm-ups was with regard to that. But yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, Imam will come under a little bit of pressure. I think there'll be enough discussion around his sort of problems, shall we say, with the short delivery specifically. Let's be honest, all teams have a very strong analyst department. They'll know his weak zones. They will come to target it. I personally thought Imam did a fairly decent job of handling that short ball weakness, if you will. It's been his Achilles heel through at least the Australian ODI series at home, through the New Zealand ODI series at home. They tried to target him, but he was patient. He chose the right times to do it. And at least in that home season, I felt he was reluctant to play that pull shot against the new ball. From what I saw, he would kind of, use the safer option, either use the pace or sort of duck it within the first 7 to 10 overs. And then in the second half, when he was set, when the ball was a little bit softer, when he wasn't as sort of assertive in that sense, he would then take on the short ball in the second half of the innings. Here, I think it's just trying to be assertive and kind of announce himself onto the stage. And it's unfortunate that in back-to-back games, he's fallen into the same delivery, which all teams will target now. I think this think tank has a lot of faith in Imam. I've seen enough of our fan base to now know, I think 90% have already dropped him from their preferred 11s and brought Fakhr in. But from what I know of this think tank, I think they'll give him one final chance against India before they go back to Fakhr for Australia.
Abdullah, your thoughts on the opening combination, both in this game, the decision, and then the upcoming game?
Yeah, with Abdullah replacing Fakhr decision, I'm honestly not sure if it was tactical or whether they feel that whether Abdullah has just gone above Fakhr in the pecking order. But one thing that I do think is important to note here is that while Babar has his shortcomings and we may criticize the team management for their decisions, this decision to back Abdullah as the third opener was probably not an easy one for them to make, because they had Shan Masood also in the reckoning, and they would have also had that factor in the back of their minds that again the team is inexperienced, but that they backed Abdullah and they supported him to play the role and that he delivered. I think it's a big credit to the management, and we already know that they're really good at backing players and supporting them, whether it's through rough patches or it's young players starting up. So this is another thing that I think goes in the as a positive for them. As for going forward, I'm honestly not sure. I do feel like Imam has a bit more leeway. I think he'll get an extended run. It's probably there's been a lot of emphasis, even by the team management, even in Grant Bradburn's press conference yesterday, that they're not playing the type of cricket that they want to from the top. So, like Kani said, that perhaps that factor is there, that he's trying to do something that he's perhaps not entirely comfortable with in terms of being attacking up front. So I feel that getting out twice in back-to-back games on the short ball, I don't think it can get much worse for him. So I'm sure he will get I'm sure he will, at least the next game, I find it difficult to think that he would be replaced by Fakhr for the next game. But perhaps later in the tournament, if this trend continues, then that can happen. But I think that they'll stick with him, and I think that he'll come good at some point. I just hope that that doesn't come after us having lost a few crucial games. And at the same time, I would also love to see Fakhr perform well again. But it's a complex situation. Abdullah has made it much more difficult for them, but thankfully it's a good problem to have in comparison to the other problems they've been having with the top order in this ODI season.
So let's go to the chase. I thought it was fantastically paced. I thought they really paced it well. There wasn't, we talked about this before we started, there wasn't any rashness to their game. It was a wonderfully flowing sort of chase. And I think they had these mini targets in their mind. Where do we want to be after 25? Where do we want to be after 30? And walk us through the chase, Ghani and Abdullah Bhai, and obviously talk about how amazing Rizwan's performance is, a Herculean effort, not just physically, but just mentally, emotionally. He really had to dig deep today and really carried this team. After, let's be kind. I thought Babar is not exactly playing with the most confidence right now. Open it up to both of you. If you want to go first, Kani, and then Abdullah.
Yeah, just before I get into the chase, I want to take a couple of minutes to speak about Abdullah Shafiq specifically. For me, this was a standout innings. Obviously, a World Cup, his first World Cup fixture, all of those things on one side. But I genuinely think we don't do the best job of sort of setting our players up for success, if you will. This bilateral season, I know they stuck him in at 4 for that one game against New Zealand, where they sort of wanted to test if he could add to the middle order depth. But and I know obviously, they had ultimate faith in Fakhr and Imam, and they gave them plenty of opportunities to solidify themselves, gives themselves the most amount of confidence. But I just think the way we approach bilaterals needs a little bit of introspect at this point. I think Abdullah Shafiq, Saud Shakil, Babar, for obvious reasons, are probably the 3 most technically sound batsmen that we have available. And today was the first time that we've seen all 3 of them together in an ODI 11. And I think that is a bit of a failure of the system in certain ways. For me, Abdullah's innings, like there's certain portions in that innings where you could see he was getting stuck. Again, it was related to his limitations against things like strike rotation against spin, right? And I think a lot of it boils down to getting that in-game exposure where he can kind of use that to apply in games like this at the World Cup. So had he gotten a few games in against, let's say, an Afghanistan or against a New Zealand, against an Australia, for example, he can use those and apply those better. I just don't think we set our players up for success in that sense. And it's one thing to say, I think Abdullah Bhai commented on it, to show faith in him and take him to the World Cup. But could we have done a better job of setting him up for success here? Just giving him more opportunities to sort of grow his game, grow his limitations. So I think those things stood out to me a little bit. I will say there's a lot to be said for Rizwan's presence. His own batting on one end, which Rizwan's sole presence for Abdullah Shafiq to guide him through those little phases. You could see there's a couple of bits where he was getting a little sort of nervy when he wanted to release short. There's a bunch of sort of dot balls coming in, but Rizwan had a very calming presence in the sense that he knew that the conditions would get much easier to bat on as the innings progressed. He knew after the 25th over, the ball would get softer. He knew there was a sort of a fair bit of inexperience in the Sri Lankan bowling. There would be a time where they would have that 5-6 over phase and they would cash in and kind of bridge the net run rate gap. So I think Rizwan's presence says a lot, right? Like there's one thing to say about his own character and how he played through the cramps and what he means to the team, but I think there's a lot to say for the mental fortitude and then for the game awareness to know. I think Pakistan's of the past, anytime the required run rate, Abdullah Bhai, I'm sure will agree with me, starts touching 8, you get, a little jittery, nerves start flowing, and then it would inevitably lead to a collapse. But with Rizwan's presence, he knew Dasun Shanaka would try to fit in a few overs of part-time spin, for example, a Dhananjaya De Silva or an Asalanka. He knew the overs they wanted to target. And more than anything, I think the thing that I appreciated most is how they approached Theekshana. Because I felt, and I think we all agreed, Theekshana was the sole sort of core threat that was in the Sri Lankan attack. And I think it said a lot about Rizwan's experience to show him a fair bit of respect, to know that even if his overs, there was a fair bit of dot balls that were, it's about absorbing pressure. And then I think at that point, Rizwan realized whether it was Patirana or whether it was Madhushankar, there would be bowlers they'd be able to cash in. So I think that made a massive difference in the chase.
Your thoughts?
Yeah, the points that you made about the pacing of the chase, I think that was really the key, because obviously when the partnership started, then we were in a pretty bad position then, with having lost Babar, and not just lost Babar, but that psychological blow almost to the team and to the fans. Everyone was starting to mourn the World Cup being over already. So I think to recover from that period was really crucial. They understood that they could take a bit of time, like the pitch and the opposition was such that you didn't have to keep going at a high rate throughout. And then, yeah, the calculation was really, I think that's an underrated aspect of, I think a lot of people don't take this into consideration, that when a when a target has to be chased, then there's actually quite a few calculations to be done. And combine that with the temperament that is required to flourish against all types of bowling. So I think that was really the key, that both Abdullah and Rizwan, they've played so much cricket, they've played test cricket, and they really knew how to go through the highs and the lows of the chase. And they always knew that if there were one or two quiet overs, then they could make them up. And the really important thing was that they made up for them in a efficient way without taking too many risks. So they always ensured that that Sri Lanka weren't able to get back into the game in a strong way, particularly by making a breakthrough at that point. So that was really the key. And of course, Abdullah, I think, deserves a lot of credit for the way he played. At the start, particularly when Rizwan wasn't so fluent like he isn't against spin, then Abdullah was able to get a few shots away. I think there were a couple of sixes down the ground that he hit that were really impressive. And we know he has that ability and that range. It was just great to see him execute his skills in the ODI format, because he's done them in tests and in T20s, but he doesn't even have any list A experience to fall back on. Like, he's played one game of domestic 50 over cricket and 4 games for Pakistan A without any significant success in any of them. So for him to be able to perform on the biggest stage, I think says a lot about his character, but also the skills. Especially at the end, before he got out, he was starting to look really dangerous. Like, that's what you expect from your ODI opener, that once he's set and he's in, then he should be able to go big. That's the great thing about Fakhar Zaman, that once he's set, he can carry on and just blast the bowling to all parts on flat track. So Abdullah showed great signs of doing that. And if he can just keep on improving his game in the middle, then I think that will go a long way to even further improving him as an ODI opener. And for Rizwan, I think Kani said everything that needs to be said. He's the heartbeat of the team, and he showed that again. Why that is again.
I'll ask for your final thoughts. I'll give mine. I think the first 2 games couldn't have gone any better. You basically defended a total against a tricky side. There was angst in that game, and then you chased down a total against a very good team who had just beaten you in a record-setting fashion, which showed maturity. I think going into the India game, it's sort of the best tune-up that you could have had. You're going into this both on form, batting-wise, but also emotionally stable and on a high, which is as much as you could ask for going into this next game. I'll ask each of you for your final thoughts. Kani, if you want to go first.
Yeah, for me, I think there'll be majority of the conversation, even after the win, will be circulating around Imam and Babar and the sort of expectations from them because of the bar they've set, albeit in bilaterals. I think our fan base rightly expects the bulk of the runs to come from them. I think a lot of the despair after the second wicket falling today was because it was the sort of surface where you expected to chase down a 350. Either one of Imam or Babar were meant to play technically the Rizwan role, right, if we're being honest. And I think that's what caused a lot of the despair, because that's the sort of expectations we have of them. Imam, I think we've talked about enough. As far as Babar's concerned, I think he'll eventually get it right. I just don't think it's fair to be on his case as much. The things that I want to sort of zone in on, my concerns from this game are more bowling related, more specific again to the middle overs. A lot to be said for Shadab Khan, a lot to be said for Shaheen Afridi. I think Hassan Ali was outstanding today. Haris Rauf, his figures might not say it, but I think on the whole he bowled fairly well today as well, and he's generally been pretty consistent. Nawaz, the matchups for him in this case weren't sometimes as favorable, but I think he also bowled with a fair amount of control. Towards the end, he was a little bit expensive. But I think the main concern is Shaheen with the new ball and then Shadab through the middle overs. Look, we know these are predominantly batting friendly surfaces. We know the power scores will range, at least on surfaces like this, between 300 and 350. At the end of the day, the bowlers shouldn't expect to get any sort of assistance from the surface, right? It boils down purely to discipline. And I think Shadab with his length, again, there was towards the end of the Netherlands innings, there were some promising signs. Today, around his, I think, third, fourth over, there were some promising signs in the kind of length he was trying to hit. But I think at a certain point, it just feels like he tries too hard, he overcompensates, tries to pitch it too far up, and then it almost feels like in every single overs there's at least one bad ball, which gives away all the pressure. And if you're not picking up middle wickets through the middle overs, it's going to create problems anyway. So I think a lot to be said for Shadab and Shaheen specifically. We'd like to see them do better with the new ball. But beyond that, as far as the batting unit is concerned, I think to their credit, to lose 2 wickets and still chase down 350. Yes, people will talk about the surface. Yes, the batting conditions get easier. Yes, it was an inexperienced Sri Lankan bowling attack. But, regardless of all of that, to chase down a 345, credit is due where credit is due. And I think the batting will take huge amounts of confidence from it. But two of your standout bowlers, Shaheen and Shadab, who you rely on in big ICC tournaments, now need to stand up.
Final thoughts?
Yeah, I agree with that main point that Khani has made there about Shaheen and Shadab. When I'm thinking of Pakistan playing in the World Cup, I'm thinking that the two most important guys in your bowling attack are essentially Shaheen and Shadab, because you need Shaheen to get new ball wickets and you need Shadab to, at crucial times in the middle, at points where the team is on the back foot, you need him to strike. And with Shadab, we've seen a few signs, but it's always fleeting signs, like maybe an over here and over there, but he's unable to really cobble together an extended spell where he's bowling well consistently. So he's still not able to find that right length or whatever. And he ends up invariably pitching it short or dropping it too full. So I think that factor is really important. And with Shaheen, I don't really know what to say. I still have hope that he's going to get it right at some point during the World Cup. And I expect him to get it right, in fact, because that's what he's done. And every time when you expect him to deliver, he has found a way to deliver. It's just that this time the signs are a little bit, they're not very encouraging. That the way that he's bowling, his pace has been down. And yes, he had the finger injury, but the finger injury cannot be the sole cause of the problems with his bowling. His bowling has been off the boil for a while. I thought that in the Sri Lanka Test series, he looked good since his comeback, but after that, he hasn't been quite at the same level. So I'm not sure what it is, but I do hope to see him back at some point in that top form that we really aspire to see him in, so that Pakistan can benefit from all the things that he brings. And with Babar, the main thing about Babar is that in the first Netherlands game, I was really I found it really surprising with the way that he was playing. He just looked like a deer in headlights almost. I don't know quite how to explain it, but today he looked better in that sense, that he seemed to be playing his shots and he didn't seem to be overburdened too much by the pressure of everything. But I just hope that these consistent performances by Rizwan and now by Abdullah at the top will free him up a little bit, because I just feel that he's carrying too much of a burden. as the captain, he's trying to figure out the other aspects of his captaincy role as well. And then he's trying to figure out how he can carry the batting, but he doesn't have to do that. Like, there are other people are more than pulling their weight at this point. So we just need him to go out there and just be Babar, just play like he always does. And I think inshallah he will get it right during the World Cup, and I really hope that it's in the next game in front of 130,000 Indians in Ahmedabad.
Thank you very much. We'll leave it there. Game 3 to look forward to, a very quiet weekend of cricket coming.